Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the second in a series of readers conference calls that we're organising at SciDev. The idea is really just to give readers the opportunity to talk directly to our team of regional editors from around the world about the things that are happening in their region. So we wanted this week to use the opportunity of International Day of Women and Girls in Science to invite three exceptional women in science to join us. That's Kathleen Aviso, who's Dean of Gokongwei College of Engineering at Salle University, Manila. International Day of Women and Girls in Science, it's become about celebrating the achievements of women in science, but also recognising the challenges and barriers that they face to full participation in science. And it seems incredible that we're still talking in those terms in the 21st century, doesn't it? How do you see the position of women in science in your region, Kay, at this time?
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. Good afternoon from the Philippines. Well, it's nice that you'll actually have this forum, and I've actually seen more and more similar forums being organized by different, different institutions. Being in the Philippines, I've been quite fortunate because in our country, I think we do not have as much problems with regards to gender equality. For example, we've had 2 female presidents maybe in the last decade or so. But nonetheless, we still do experience difficulties, I suppose, with regards to expectations and responsibilities at home, being a woman. And I suppose it cuts across any kind of discipline. That there are some things that you might not have as much time with regards to pursuing your career or devoting as much time so that you can really focus on your development. But we've seen a bit more focus, and people are now being more aware of this gender inequality and are trying to make strides really to make things more workable for the females in the community.
And you yourself, you are a professor of chemical engineering. Yes. And this must be a fairly male-dominated field, is it? How have you coped with that as you've forged your career?
Well, actually, among the engineering fields, especially in the country, I'm not sure if the profile would be the same elsewhere, but in the Philippines, the chemical engineering would be the engineering field with more females than males. So it would be the mechanical engineering field that would be more male dominated. Although when I've gone out like in international conference, I still see that we don't have a lot of women in this particular field. And I can say that I've been lucky in a sense because of my experience, because of having good mentors. And so it has somehow eased my way into the community by being around very supportive mentors. So they really they really provide a lot of support, and especially during the times that you might be doubting yourself, or sometimes that you feel that you don't feel heard, or your opinions don't really matter. They've really they are really very important people, who have helped me succeed in this particular career.
Mm-hmm. And just before this discussion started, we were talking a bit about COVID and how that's impacted scientists in general. We hear a lot about how women and girls are disproportionately affected by, or have been disproportionately affected by COVID. Is that your experience? How do you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with being at home, and you just have so many more distractions when you're at home. And if you're a woman, you're also expected to do most of the housework, in contrast to maybe a male person who's at home. But I've been quite fortunate. In addition to that, some of the difficulties also happen when you have experimental work, because now it can no longer go to the field, you can no longer go to the laboratories. So that's been a drawback for some scientists and researchers. I've been fortunate in that aspect because my work is primarily computational in nature. So what I really need would just be my laptop and software that I would use for my studies. And in that aspect, we've remained productive with regards to research. On the other hand, with regards to being at home, there have been distractions. Like I need to attend to my kids whenever they have some assignments that need to be done. But in Manila or in the Philippines, we typically have extended families. So we're a very close-knit nation. And so, like, for example, here in our household, I still live with my parents, and my brother is also with us. So there's a lot of us within the household, and I guess that's also helped lighten up some of the load. At least you can have somebody else work on other things, and not everything rests upon your shoulders. So that's been so yeah. I've been lucky.
Well, I can totally identify with that, and I think the not having the enough distance between home and work life can be problematic, and I'll use that as my excuse for my slightly muddled beginning to this conference call, and the fact that I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Ruth Douglas. I'm the deputy editor for news here at SciDev. And just to give everyone a bit more of a background on you, you've got a PhD in industrial engineering from Salle University. You're the author of more than 190 publications in peer-reviewed journals. Can you perhaps give people a bit more of an idea of what you're working on at the moment?
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so my background, actually, I did a bachelor's in chemical engineering, eventually did a master's in environmental engineering and management, and then pursued a PhD in industrial engineering. So most of the things that I do are, like I mentioned, development of computational techniques for environmental decision making. So we work on models that can help decision makers make better informed decisions on different problems relating to the environment. So we've done a lot of work on like renewable energy or sustainable energy systems, and for example, efficient utilization of resources. And now more recently, what we've been focusing on would be the negative emissions technology. So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with it, but we all know that we have this problem with climate change, and that we recently just had a COP26, wherein different nations are trying to commit on their reduction in their carbon emissions. But to be able to actually reach the net zero emissions by 2050, we need to do more than just transitioning to renewable fuel or improving energy efficiencies. So recently, there's been a hype on negative emission technology. So as the name suggests, essentially what it does is that it creates a net transfer of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to a different compartment. So it can be captured like in geological storage facilities and things like that. So that's something that we're working on. I currently have a PhD student who's trying to look at the potential of the deployment of negative emission technologies. And she's actually looking at how a mix of these technologies might differ from one region to another, because even though they can capture carbon dioxide from the air, there are other things that need to be considered, like, for example, Like, for example, just the use of biofuel. Like, even if you have biofuel, you would need additional resources to grow your biomass. So those things have also need to be taken into consideration. So now my student is actually looking at, are there regional constraints that need to be met? And so those might actually influence the type of technology that you can deploy in certain regions of the world.
Really interesting. Maybe some of our attendees would like to come back on that later. And I would just to say, please do put any questions that you have in the chat. Rana Dajani is, as I mentioned before, Professor of Molecular Cell Biology at Hashemite University, Jordan. And I understand you're also visiting professor at Yale and Cambridge universities. Your research area of expertise is in epigenetics and biomarkers of trauma among refugees and across generations, which sounds absolutely fascinating. We hope you can tell us a bit more about that. You're a member of UN Women Jordan's Advisory Council and founder of the literacy programme We Love Reading that you just mentioned, which we'd love to hear more about as well. Welcome, thank you so much for coming. I was just saying to Bethina, I'd asked her to talk about the position of women in science in the Middle East at this time. I mean, traditionally it must be an incredibly challenging place for women to enter a whole number of professions, but perhaps science in particular, and maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the question and for holding this panel, which is very, very important, very relevant today for women all over the world, globally, not just in the Arab world. But in particular, if we want to talk about the Arab world, yes, we have less women representation in higher career positions in STEM and similar to other fields, whether you're talking about business or law or politics. But I don't think this is unique to the Arab world. This is similar across the world globally, in the sense that we are all not at parity, not 50-50. But even then, the UNESCO, I think, just produced some very interesting statistics that there are 37% of female of the STEM field scientists are actually female in the Arab world, compared to, I think, 33% in Europe. So actually, we're doing much better than, well, not much, but at least higher than Europe, and therefore, I think it's interesting to try to understand what's going on. And to me, I'm a basic scientist, but I think this is a shout out to scientists from the social sciences and the humanities to make an effort to study what are the trends happening in the Arab world that are producing more girls in STEM at school. We already claim the higher percentages of girls in STEM in education. And therefore, how is that also being translated in higher percentages, this 37%, at the level of a career? However, the problem still stands globally. And I think also there's a stereotype problem here. And of course, the journalists here are better than me at discussing this. But definitely there's a stereotype against Arabs and against Muslims where it is perceived that they are oppressed, they're perceived they don't have enough freedoms. And yet I'm giving you statistics of how many girls are in STEM.
Well, I've obviously bought into that right. Misperception. So thank you for putting us right.
So no, it's okay. And that's why I'm calling it out. And I want to shift the conversation to the global level. And what I'd like to say is that globally we have a problem. And I think this relates to that the workplace as we know it now was created by men for men. And when, and this is right, moving from an agricultural community to an industrial one. And then when women entered the workplace because of world wars and less men being available to be employed in the industry, women didn't say, wait a minute, we want to change the framework of how this workplace looks like. We tried to fit in, we molded ourselves to fit into the existing framework. And hence we are being measured by indicators and frameworks that were developed for men by men. Rather than, and it's like that cartoon from Einstein, where it says, a fish is not successful because it can't climb a tree. Well, it is, but because it can swim. So how do we identify and celebrate the uniqueness and diversity of not just women and men, but all human beings and their difference and their beautiful differences, and giving them the trust in themselves that they can fulfill their own passions without having to fit a particular mold, which globally is the only one we all see. And I think that's what I love to highlight and what I wrote about in my book, Five Scarves, trying to explain that to the future generations and to ourselves so that now we can take control, change the framework to fit us, which includes not having an age limit of 40 for awards and fellowships and career, right? As women, we know we keep going, as MIT study showed, that we keep going up as a zigzag even after 40, although men go up and at 40 they plateau in terms of their career. And so we want to have the freedom to choose our priorities and for society to trust us that if we now decide to, for example, have a baby, that should be respected. So again, what's the differences between men and women? We're all the same brain. We have our unique talents. But one very important difference between men and women is I have a uterus and a man doesn't. Although some men argue with me and tell me, but technology is going to advance and men are going to be able to have babies. And I say, okay, when that happens, we'll talk about it. But at the moment, we're the only ones with a uterus and we have an age limit when we can have a baby. And so we want to have the control and not to sacrifice to have the child when we want to, and then to go back to our career when we want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about getting more women, more girls into science education, and that's been successful in the Middle East. What can we learn from your region in that respect then? I mean, this must be fundamental really to levelling the playing field for women in this field.
That's a $1 million question, or nobody talks about $1 million questions these days. It has to be a $1 billion question. I'm not a social scientist, so I cannot say scientifically why I think we're doing much better. And that's why this is a call out to social scientists to come and study what's happening here. And it's a call out to social scientists from the region because they know the culture more, to try to tease apart what are those elements. We wrote a paper recently, which I can maybe post in the chat, trying to identify what are the possible reasons, but maybe some of them, and again, I don't want to be quoted because these have to be based on scientific research, but already we know some of it is when you have role models, female role models. So having schools that are female, we know girls who graduate from only girls school are a lot more confident, especially in the teenager years. And so this boost of confidence without being compared to a boy, and because that comparison, oh, boys are good at math, girls aren't, that immediately sets the limits. But if you're in an environment where you're not being judged by your gender, you're all the same, so you can look at, oh, she's good at math or she isn't, and then women or girls can explore that passion of really what they want rather than being measured to a boy. So that could be one, to explore that, to try to understand that. I think the rich history and heritage of the Arab Islamic world, where religion actually is not a barrier to learning and using your mind. Actually, religion encourages that women and men have equal opportunity in education, and that you are judged for your mind. And so this encouragement for girls to be celebrated for being good at school, good at math, good at science, it's a positive thing compared to the West, where, oh, if you're good, that means you're not going to be attractive. I mean, as has been quoted. So again, I think that heritage seeps through to celebrate girls, because if you want to even, I think like a successful girl is somebody who does good at school, especially in the sciences and the math. So that's kind of a good criteria. So these are some hints, but again, being a scientist, I have to make a disclosure and 100 lines that these have to be studied, and I'm sure there's a lot of treasure in there that we can all learn from.
Great, yeah, thank you for that. Mamokgethi Phakeng, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Hi. Let me just give people a bit more background on you. You're Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cape Town. You've got a PhD in maths education from the University of Witwatersrand. You've got more than 80 research papers to your name, a string of awards. You've founded the Adopt a Learner Foundation. What, if I may ask you, what's the achievement that you're most proud of?
My achievement, and I hope you say my achievement as a human, and my achievement is actually the fact that I've raised 3 good men. I've got 3 sons, and the youngest is 25. They're graduates, and they are good men. One in engineering, one in economics, and the other one in anatomy. So that's my greatest success. I think, yeah, it probably is not what you expect, but I mean, you can ask me.
That's good to hear. And yeah, we've been talking about how this day is about, or International Day of Women in Science is about celebrating the achievements of women, but also the barriers that they face to full participation in science. And how about in South Africa? Are those barriers still very real?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is that diversity and marginalized groups, let me call them that, in STEM disciplines is a much wider topic. So it wouldn't just be about gender, but gender is a key issue. So for us in South Africa, given our background, it's also about race. So you know, if you're talking about who's marginalized, it would be at the bottom of that colonial procession, would be Black women. And if someone checks, I mean, the last time I checked the data, we're doing much better in terms of women in STEM getting into undergraduate programs. But there's been a lot of initiatives. But it's been, of course, interesting listening to my colleagues, Botina, talking about giving reasons as to why has the Arab world perhaps done better? And what is it that perhaps serves as a barrier? I mean, I think messages about mathematics, just messages, public messages about mathematics are not so encouraging. And then public messages about women in mathematics are not so encouraging. They give an impression that you must be a superhuman being to succeed. And I know that because I get into many spaces, even as vice-chancellor, when people ask me, what are you professor of? I can't even finish the sentence, and people start confessing about how bad they were at mathematics or how smart I am. And that can look innocent, but actually it's not innocent. It gives a message to whoever is listening that it is okay not to do well in mathematics. You actually don't have to try. For many girls or many young people might think, I don't have to try, because if the CEO of this company, or if this entrepreneur, or this person I respect feels that it's difficult, or they say they were never good at it, how can I be good at it? And so you get a lot of that. And I think the way to deal with encouraging young women into mathematics, my message all the time is, if you don't have anything good to say about mathematics, do not say anything at all. Because I think that's a good place to start. Nobody owns up to not having been good at French or at geography, but people feel comfortable owning up not being good at mathematics. I mean, frankly speaking, not everybody even owns up to having bad at biology or chemistry. That's allowed. But mathematics, it's like, it's something else, you know? So I think that's the messaging. We need to change that. And then it's like, also, it's one thing to achieve the numbers, right? We need the numbers in mathematics. And I think Bonita's point was also very important in that regard. I think the numbers are important, but I think the numbers are not everything. They're important, but not sufficient. So you get the women into science or STEM disciplines, and then what? We get the women into leadership positions, and then what? And I can tell many stories, having walked the journey of being a young academic and then getting into executive management and being vice-chancellor right now, that the journey of a woman in a leadership position in a scarce skills area is very complex. And a good example, a simple example, you know, being vice-chancellor, you know, we started a program when I took office, a future UCT 2030 Future Leaders Program. And selecting women on merit, simply on merit. We have a rating system, and the women, and we select the young people who are 35 and below can get rated in there as those who have potential to be future leaders. And the majority of them came out being women. I mean, it was astonishing. And I thought, wow, what happens to these women? I mean, we are the top university on the African continent. Clearly, this is not a first, but what happens to these women as they move on? And then I have meetings with them one-on-one, right? To say to them, we want to support you, we want to be the leading scholar that you are destined to be. And I say, what kind of support you need? And they didn't want increase in salary. They didn't want whatever. One of them said, look, I have 2 kids. They are small. And me and my husband are mathematicians. When we go to conferences, I would like to go with my children. Because oftentimes we have to choose. And then it's me who stays at home because I'm the mother. And in that way, my career is not going to grow. All right. And then one says, I just had a divorce, and I've got little children. I can't be in the lab. I can't do bench time teaching and also see to my children. So if you can deal with my teaching, at least for one term a year, can you ask the department to take me off teaching 1 term and I can focus on this? I promise I'll do all that's needed to be that top. And these are just 2 examples. Which donor, which funder thinks of funding, having a fund? I think I've seen 1 since I've been in this business for over 20 years, that funds, that puts out a call for women to apply to go to conferences with their children. It is not easy. And because this is tricky, and of course, what one does is that I go to the department, I say to the head of department, I've got this program, I'm making money available. This is what this one in your department needs. I want, and the head of department, it's a department of all men, and she's the only woman. And the head of department says, oh no, but we can't do that for her. What about other people? I'm like, but other people don't have this need. I mean, then you get into other politics. So the complexity of you get in, and I'm talking about even women who've got PhDs, right? So it's one thing to have a PhD. We need leading scientists. We need people who will show up in the world as leading scientists in their disciplines, leading science councils, leading institutions, leading research entities. And that for me is, there's different steps. We get more, and then what? So in terms of Potina's case, I would say we've got so many Arab questions, Arab women, and you said, how did you get that? And I thought, my question was, why am I not seeing them at my conferences? Can you see our questions are different, Ruth? Because I'm saying they're there. We need to ask the next question. We should be seeing Arab women everywhere. And why are we not seeing them? It's because there are other things that hold them back.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would really like to see whether there are any questions from our audience today, but no one's dropped in anything yet. Would anyone like to put any questions to our guests? And if not, perhaps any of our editors might have something to ask or contribute.
Yes, Ruth, please, I would like to ask a question. Thank you for our
Julien,
request.
can you just introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Shongwang Julien. I am the editor of the French language edition of SciDev-Net. So the question I would like to ask to all of you is, was it easy for you in your context to find thesis subject or supervisors? I ask this question because some women scientists in Sub-Saharan Africa have told us that professors were reluctant to accept to supervise them for their thesis because they fear that they that being a woman, they will not be able to complete their research. So what was the difficulties that you face in your context to find a subject and to find a supervisor for your thesis? Thanks.
I think that's a brilliant question. I mean, I had a woman supervisor, and the woman supervisor actually approached me when I was finishing my honors. In South Africa, we've got the honors program after the bachelor's program. And there was a male professor who approached me, but I had sort of my way of working, because they had both taught me, I resonated with the woman professor. And you know, every time I talk about the success of my career, I mention her, Professor Jill Adler, because frankly speaking, it's the way she worked with me. And I keep wondering, is it because she's a woman? Is it because she's just an excellent mentor? Is it because she knows how to do this thing? Because I have never seen someone who does this. The first thing she said to me, she said, I will know that I have done a good job if you become better than I am. And she said, the first thing that I'm going to expect from you is that one day after you finished your PhD, you introduce me to people I do not know yet, and they are your collaborators. And this is a top scientist. He's a leading scholar in her field. You know, the president of the International Commission of Mathematical Instruction, you know, and there's nothing as affirming as that she thinks I can be better than her. And I think that for me, I think having been supervised by a woman, even though I didn't just select her because she's a woman, I think being supervised by a woman enabled my success. And every step of the way, in the time, you know, even the things I can talk to her about, because I already had a family when I was doing my doctorate. You know, and certain things are possible, other things are not possible. I can do this, I want to do this, I want to, you know, and we could discuss. I'm not sure if I would have been as comfortable discussing that with a man. And then they would understand, they wouldn't think I'm being baby-like and I want to be babysat and so on. So perhaps we don't tell that story of women supervisors or women mentors who do things differently and who have raised other women. People ask even today, why do you still acknowledge your supervisor after more than 20 years of getting a PhD? That's because what she did, I'm definitely sure that many people wouldn't have been able to do it. From making sure that I have funds to register, to making sure that I do cutting edge science, to challenging me, to making me publish, pushing me to publish in top international journals without telling me they are top international journals. And 3 years after the PhD, I realized, wow, I'm in good company, but I had no idea. And she even used my naivety to channel me, to build myself. And that, because if she told me that it's international, it's this or that, maybe I would have been intimidated. So I think we don't tell the story of women mentors. At the moment, we tell the story of the women's success stories of women, but not also of women who make other women successful. I've seen stories of men who support women, and I think that's important because allyship is really, really key. But there's also stories of women who support women, and I continue to be in contact with her. And I have heard the story that some men prefer not to choose women, and it's not surprising. They choose not to supervise women. It's not surprising because there are also employers who avoid women because they say things like, what happens when she gets pregnant? Who's going to be in the lab? We need people who can be in the lab throughout. We do have stories of surgery, people who specialize in different aspects of surgery, who talk about the difficulties that you cannot even, you can't go to be a specialist in any level of, in any area of surgery because you're a woman, and the minute, if you have children, any complexity, you are out. So these things are not surprising, but perhaps we should find strategies to deal with them. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you.
Can I comment on that as well, if you don't mind? Yeah. So thank you very much for sharing all the wonderful stories, because I want to, add to what you said, is role models, telling the story. We don't tell the stories enough. We only tell stories of particular scientists. And usually the stories are about women who've sacrificed everything and are more like a man. Those are the stories we hear. And it sets up expectations or reduces expectations, however you want to look at it, in the sense that, oh, if I want to have a family, that means I can't be a scientist. And I think it's about highlighting these role models who look like us, who dress like us, who speak our language, who have been able to prioritize and fulfill their instincts, and also achieve their dreams. And I think highlighting those stories, and that's why this is an encouragement and a shout out to write your story. You should write your story, Professor, and everyone, so that we can read them. Not just Marie Curie. I mean, I respect Marie Curie a lot, but we need to read somebody who, of course, was in another country. I want to read about somebody who looks like me. So that's one. And mentoring. So mentoring is so important. Like you said, having a female mentor, not just a male mentor. There are certain things, as was discussed, that you cannot, he will not understand or comprehend, although there are fantastic male mentors. I'm not going to say there aren't. And so we have developed a mentoring program called 3 Circles of Alimat, which is about, an Alimat in Arabic means female scientist. This is a free toolkit where you, wherever you are in your institution, you find you pair people together, and they kind of like speed dating, and then they start a relationship of helping each other. It's not about senior and junior. I could mentor you in one thing and you could mentor me in another sector, depending on the different experiences we have. And mentoring, not to promote me or to get me a grant, mentoring to support me, to understand my personal and professional, and to talk through, because men have that men's club. They meet in the afternoon, they have coffee. We don't. And so we need this network of support. So reach out for somebody, if you know somebody, and for those who people reach out to them, give your time and support. And I think that's very important. And also storytelling. Sometimes we forget also to tell the stories of the men who have supported women. We don't highlight them. And so you only have one image of the males who don't. And I think we also need to highlight the stories of men, to encourage more men to be supportive of women, because it takes also a family, a society to trust women. And lastly, I think I would like to talk about how do we change those frameworks that confine us as women by not allowing us to take our children to conferences because there's no framework, by not giving us time. And that's part of the system, not something I have to ask as a favor, but the system should be catered that, yes, she's going to be away for 9 months, she's pregnant, or after she delivers the baby, she wants to be with that baby, and men should shoulder part of that responsibility as well. But this requires a system change, a change of frameworks that not just in the STEM field, but also in all fields of work. We should not be the exception or the excuse. This is nature. We are producing the next generation. What is more important than that? Hence, I applaud you for saying the biggest achievement is being a mother. Same thing. Nobody talks about that. You don't put it on your CV. To me, when I introduce myself, I say I'm a mother of 4, and that's the biggest thing I could ever done in my life. And that has to become the general trend amongst us. So yeah, and it's great to be in all of your company. I am humbled.
Yeah, I'd like to just chip in a few words as well. So I essentially will just echo what the other panelists have mentioned. I also mentioned earlier on the importance of a mentor, really. So I think that's one step. So thank you for the question. It is a very important task to actually choose the correct mentor to guide you out in your studies. And it's fortunate for someone to be able to to actually meet someone that aligns with the way you work, with the way you think, because that really plays a big part on the success of your studies. So that relationship really needs to be nurtured. And that's right. No, we really need to tell more stories about these successes. And I think another thing that we need to promote is that for successful women is to really pay it forward. Like if you've felt this kind of mentoring as a student, then I think the next step is to be that good mentor for the next generation. So I guess that's all.
Thanks, Kay. Thanks, everyone. A question from one of our readers, Lois Westman. Thank you for joining us. You ask, I would love to hear if Dr. Dajani's research shows gender differences in epigenetics and refugee experiences.
Well, yes, thank you for the question. Yes, we look at everything. You know, we look at different factors and indicators that could influence epigenetic markers of trauma. Gender is one of them, right? But we look at everything else. And again, I want to highlight that gender has become such a central discussion that it becomes the only thing that distinguishes us from each other when we have a million markers that make us different. And yes, gender is one of them. But it's not necessarily the only one. So we do look at it. We still are working on, we haven't, for example, for the children, the teenagers we've studied, we haven't seen a gender difference in epigenetic markers, well, looking at particular genes, but we are still in the middle of analyzing our data. So we can't give a full answer until we're done with the data. So stay tuned. And we're not just looking at refugees cross-sectional. And this is fascinating. We're looking at intergenerational. So we're looking at grandmothers, their daughters, and their granddaughters their grandmother was pregnant during the war, and to see, was that epigenetic signature of trauma transferred? One. Two, we're always looking at the negative side. And again, this is something we've adopted, and what we're challenging now is, why don't we ask the flip? How is that experience boosting my resilience? How is it making me deal with the trauma in a positive way, rather than just looking how it increases anxiety and stress? And I'm always the optimist in that sense. So that would be our second question. Has this what is the epigenetic signature of trauma on resilience? How are we dealing with it? Because humans have been dealing with trauma for millennia, and yet we survive. We are resilient. So what is the epigenetic signature of that? So stay tuned.
We've, for obvious reasons, sort of focused exclusively on women today, but you know, men are an important part of this question, and both in terms of you know, changing the culture, and but also allowing men to take on some of the roles that have traditionally been women's roles. And our managing editor, Ben Dayton, has a question about childcare. Often organisations make provisions for women to work flexibly because of childcare, yet those same provisions are often not offered to men. How can we change that?
You know, can I take a quick stab and then allow others? I just want to highlight something about childcare. You know, there are I was in a conference at UNICEF, and they were celebrating, some speaker from a country was celebrating how their women, as soon as they give birth, they can go back to work, and they have their children in nurseries. And that really stopped me. And I said, wait, who is the best person to take care of your child? You or somebody in a nursery? Of course it's you. And psychologically, it's better for you to do that. And so why are we celebrating women who are tough and go back immediately to work, and their kids taken up by a nursery, when bringing up children, as we know today, from 0 to 5, is the most important time for child development, brain development, social interaction. And having a caring mother and father, of course, is the most important thing. So why don't we, this is the frame shift I was talking about. Why don't we allow the mothers, and time off for the fathers, but the mother in the beginning, she's breastfeeding. Her role is fundamental. We know that from research. And if she doesn't want, let her do whatever she wants. Again, to trust her choice, trust her opinion. But if she has this urge, this natural urge to want to be with her baby and take care of it, she shouldn't have to sacrifice that and people to clap that she was able to go back, which is more like a man, than to take care of her child. So how we need to, and UNICEF said, yeah, you're right. You know, we should be putting that money instead of to nurseries to give it back to the woman who's staying at home with her child, and count that as work to the GDP, right? Change how we measure GDP. Count those hours I'm at home bringing up the next generation, whether it's a mother or a father, count it as part of the GDP. That's the system change we need to celebrate bringing up the next generation. And then following our passions, and therefore our career path changes. So we don't retire early because we're doing our work because we want to do it. We've taken our time off when we wanted for our children, and now we can go back into the workplace and give. Some men told me, oh, after 40, nobody's productive. And I said, yeah, probably that's you, but not women. That's when we are at our utmost, because we've fulfilled our biology. We've got all this energy now, and we want to give back. We're talented. Even research has shown the maternal brain evolves and becomes much more capable. And this is research based on animal studies and humans, that the maternal brain really becomes so much more after giving birth and taking care of children. So there's a lot of potential there that we have been misplacing because the framework is very patriarchal. We need to change it and create our own. And that's why we need women in leadership and be 50-50, so we can change the rules, create new frame shifts of how the workplace looks, and emphasize them and allow that freedom of choice for women to choose what they want.
Someone's telling me that they've put a question in chat, but I can't see it for some reason.
I can ask it live if you like.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. That's so good to know that you and we've got
me.
that capacity. Great.
I'm not appearing on video, but I'm here.
Okay, no problem.
I'm here at home
Thanks for
near
joining us.
London. My wife's out at work and 3 boys are here. But actually it's, they're big enough. They don't need a lot of parenting, not quite as advanced as Professor Phakeng's boys, but they're doing all right. The eldest is studying engineering at uni, and the others, they're doing all right, you know. But that really great contributions. Actually, I work for the National Institute for Health Research in the UK, and it's great to get such diverse perspectives. And as a global health funder, we're interested in strengthening the capacity of institutions and individual researchers in low and middle income countries. And when I say that, obviously, we're not talking about the Rolls-Royce universities like UCT so much, but you're already strong capacity there, right? But we've identified women in early career roles as a priority to support with more flexible, family-friendly funding arrangements. Just wondered what sort of things the panelists would like to see in that area. So we're thinking specifically around doctoral students and postdocs, and we know that there's a big drop-off in women continuing beyond that sometimes because of the pressures of academic, life and the needs.
Good question. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I can respond to that. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done, not especially in the Philippines, not just for women in particular. So for example, it's not commonplace that students would venture towards postgraduate degrees. That in itself is very difficult for us, both for men and women. So a lot of our students prioritize going into the industry. It's primarily because of the climate as well in the country. Even after their postgraduate degrees, there are no jobs to actually support them afterwards. So some of them, they feel that there is no additional benefit to pursuing postgraduate degrees. But of course, for supporting, scholarships are definitely needed, because people don't see the value until they're actually in that situation already. And most of the individuals, for example, in the country, don't see a future after postgraduate degrees. So that in itself has to change. But I know that scholarships are very important, and can change a lot of lives.
All right. I mean, I know Patrick says he's not talking about UCTs, but the issue is that there's no Rolls-Royce in Africa. There are a few universities that are managing to keep their head above the water, and they can disappear in no time without support. And we know what's happened to some of them in the continent that were strong many years ago, and now they're no longer that strong. So I think we've got to support. I mean, wouldn't it be great to have in the top 50 universities in the world a university that's in Africa, competing with the Yales and the Oxfords of this world? I think that could be great. Africa needs a good story like that. And I think when it comes to this, the question that you're asking, and I think the example that I gave of just calls for when you make a call for proposals for funding for projects, an indication that women can indicate if they have children, if they have a family or children they need to travel with. I think an openness like that would be useful. I think a separate fund just for women or for families, where families can apply for funding as they pursue their careers. I think postdoctoral fellowships can also destroy families. I mean, many of us who are in these careers, I mean, one of the many stories we don't tell, and I know that Botina has challenged me to tell my story, which I'm busy with that. Is that if one day you just held a talk and just find out how many women who are in STEM or in a leadership positions, whose families basically destroyed, their marriages fell apart, you'd find many. There's a certain stage at which a woman, sometimes, depending on the culture as well, because there's also cultural, impositions here, that things that you're expected to do or to be as a woman in a particular culture. And at some stage you make choices. And sometimes the choice is as simply as, my marriage can end. I want this that badly. Whether you say that's a good decision or not, it's neither here nor there. The point is, that's not a choice that many men get faced with. But for women, that at least in my culture, that choice comes where one has to make a choice as a woman. So I think having family-friendly grants can help in that regard, because but of course it doesn't help everywhere, because the men, if they are not a scientist, then they've got to tag along. If they are a scientist, then it's it's enabling for both. And I think postdoctoral fellowships, it's particularly at a time when people are starting families, and making it clear that you are family friendly and people should indicate what their family needs are. Just lastly, we at UCT decided a few years ago to have a residence for families, students who are families, whether they come from South Africa or they come from outside the country, elsewhere on the continent or anywhere. And that in that residence, it's a university residence, they can come with their partners and their children. They live there. And the arrangement is different. During the holidays, they can stay there. So it's that recognition. On campus, we do have a preschool where we prioritize children of our postgraduate students. And of course, some of our undergraduate students go there, and children of employees. But many, in many spaces, this wouldn't be a possibility to say we have a residence that's suitable for students. But then we need funders who can then fund that, because often that's not possible. They come in on funding of the one person, a woman or the man. But it helps. Many who come from elsewhere on the African continent can start and finish their degree here because the husband is here, the children are here, and it just makes it better. It keeps the family together as someone is pursuing a postdoc or a doctorate. Thanks, Ruth.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Phakeng, and thank you to everyone, Kay and Rana. Thank you. That's been a really fascinating discussion, and I think we do have to wind it up now. There are a couple of unanswered questions which, if anyone feels inclined to answer on the chat, please do. Let's hope that that with some of those ideas put into action, and the changing the messaging, women like yourselves, who we've billed you as extraordinary women, and I think you really are extraordinary women in science. With women like you changing the messaging, let's hope that in not too long to come, when it's International Day of Women and Girls in Science, we're only celebrating the achievements of women and not having discussions about the barriers and challenges that women still face. Just to finish by saying that this is, as I mentioned, a monthly event, and I'm hoping that Davis, our content editor, will just drop a link into page where you can sign up to hear about future events. It would be great to have you join us again. And this was also originally part of a subscription package that we have started running called SciDev-Net Plus. So please, we'll drop in a link to that as well. Includes a monthly newsletter. Please check it out. Okay, thanks again to everyone. Thanks for everyone for attending.